Welcome back to Bookkast, Bestsellers in Minutes. Today we're diving deep into the world of Elon Musk through Walter Isaacson's new biography, and wow, it is a wild ride.
Yeah, it's a real page turner. Isaacson doesn't hold back.
So let's start at the beginning. Isaacson paints a pretty vivid picture of Musk's childhood,
Yeah.
and it wasn't exactly easy.
No, not at all. Growing up in South Africa, Musk faced some really tough times. Bullying, a difficult relationship with his father, Errol. Isaacson really paints Errol as this kind of brilliant but unstable figure.
Yeah.
And his impact on Elon is pretty clear.
There's this one story about Elon being sent to a wilderness survival camp as a kid, almost like Lord of the Flies.
Right. It's a pretty intense image. It makes you wonder how much that experience shapes his resilience. Musk was a small kid, often picked on, but he learned to survive in a really harsh environment.
It's like a theme throughout his life, right? Always facing these huge challenges and finding a way to overcome them.
Definitely. But even with those struggles, there are these glimpses of the future Elon. As a kid, he was reading encyclopedias, teaching himself to code. He even created and sold his own video game when he was 12.
12 years old. Seriously.
Yeah, 12. He was obviously a bright kid. But it wasn't just technical skills. He loved science fiction, especially The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Now that's a book that can really spark the imagination.
Totally. And for Musk, it wasn't just escapism. Isaacson suggests that these stories really fueled his sense of wonder and even helped him cope with some pretty dark existential thoughts as a teenager.
So these early passions, they planted the seeds for his later ambitions. You can almost see a direct line from reading about space travel to founding SpaceX years later.
It's a great point. It shows how childhood interests can sometimes foreshadow our life's work.
Exactly. But let's not forget, Musk was also developing his entrepreneurial instincts early on.
Oh, yeah. Isaacson tells this great story about him, trying to convince his dad that a get-rich-quick scheme involving roulette wouldn't work.
So even as a teenager, he was thinking about risk and probability, applying logic to debunk his dad's ideas.
Right. It's a funny story, but it shows that analytical mind at work and that love for strategy. It's something we see again and again.
So eventually Musk makes his way to North America. Isaacson describes his arrival in Canada as this big adventure.
Yeah, he basically showed up with a backpack and $100.
Wow.
Determined to make a new life.
And you have to admire his mom, May, working multiple jobs to support herself and Elon while he was studying at the University of Pennsylvania.
She sounds like a remarkable woman. Her work ethic definitely rubbed off on Elon.
It was at Penn that he really started focusing on the ideas that would define his career. Sustainable energy, space exploration, the power of the internet.
And this was the early 90s. Electric cars were a fringe idea. The internet was just starting to take off.
Musk was already thinking decades ahead.
It's that visionary quality that sets him apart. He doesn't just see what is, he sees what could be.
So what was he like as a student?
Isaacson paints a picture of him being very driven, spending hours in the library. He even met a fellow student, Robin Wren. They shared this passion for physics and engineering. They'd spent hours talking about these grand ideas, about rockets and electric vehicles.
Sounds like the early blueprint for SpaceX and Tesla was forming.
Yeah, exactly.
But it wasn't all work and no play, right?
No, definitely not. Isaacson mentions this friend of Musk's, Adeo Ressi, kind of the life of the party.
So this is the guy who got Elon to loosen up.
Apparently, Isaacson describes Musk being able to switch between intense work mode and letting loose with friends.
So before we jump into his early ventures like Zip2, do you think this ability to compartmentalize, to go from intense focus to socializing, is part of what makes him so successful?
That's a great question. Maybe that ability to shift gears, to not be constantly consumed by work, allows him to recharge and come back with fresh perspectives.
So speaking of work, let's talk about Musk's first foray into the world of startups.
Zip2. Yeah. Zip2, the online city guide that predates Google Maps and Yelp by years. This is where we see Musk's entrepreneurial spirit take shape.
He and his brother Kimball really poured everything into this company, working crazy hours, sleeping on couches, even using their mom's credit card to keep things afloat.
Classic Silicon Valley startup story.
Right down to the ramen noodle diet.
But even with the hustle and the eventual success of Zip2, there were signs of the conflicts to come. Isaacson describes Musk clashing with investors and board members, already showing that need for control.
That drive. That need to be in the driver's seat. It's like a double-edged sword.
Definitely.
On one hand, it fuels his ambition, allows him to push boundaries.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it can lead to friction and power struggles.
It's something we'll see play out again and again.
And we'll see that even more dramatically with his next venture, X.com, which would eventually become, and that's a whole other story. But I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've seen the formative experiences, the early signs of brilliance, and the hints of the complexities to come.
We've just scratched the surface. Things are about to get really interesting as we delve into the rise of SpaceX, Tesla, and the man who's become a global icon. So we left off with Musk walking away from PayPal with millions and a hunger for something bigger.
And that led him straight to SpaceX.
Well, not exactly. First, there was that trip to Russia.
Oh, yeah. He's trying to buy those refurbished ICBMs. Like, who even thinks of that?
Right. But it shows how serious he was about making humanity multiplanetary.
He really believes space travel could be cheaper and more efficient.
And that's how SpaceX was born.
But it wasn't easy.
Those first few years were tough. Launch failures, money troubles. It almost bankrupted the company.
It's amazing he didn't give up.
But Musk never wavered. Isaacson describes him pushing his team to the limits, setting impossible deadlines.
There's that quote from one of his engineers. I learned never to tell him no.
Right, just say you're going to try.
And eventually it paid off. SpaceX started racking up wins.
Launching rockets, landing them back on Earth, even contracts with NASA.
It was a huge validation of Musk's vision.
But even with SpaceX taking off, he had another big idea brewing.
Tesla.
He'd been fascinated by electric cars since college.
And in 2004, he invested in Tesla Motors.
And of course, he didn't stay a passive investor for long.
Soon he was CEO.
Running the show.
Isaacson really highlights Musk's hands-on leadership at Tesla.
Sleeping on the factory floor, obsessed with every little detail.
He wasn't content with just building electric cars. He wanted to reinvent the car.
And just like with SpaceX, he faced roadblocks, production delays, money problems, resistance from the auto industry.
But he never backed down.
Poured his own money into the company, rallied his team.
And turned Tesla around.
But that relentless drive, it can also be a problem.
Right. Isaacson doesn't ignore Musk's flaws.
His impulsiveness, his communication style, his tendency to get into public feuds.
Like that time he got into it with the British cave diver.
Yeah, the pedo guy tweet. It was a huge PR disaster.
So we've got this complex picture of Musk, the brilliant innovator, the relentless leader, the sometimes reckless provocateur.
It's a fascinating mix.
And it makes you wonder, can he keep pushing himself like this?
That's a great question, and it leads us into the next chapter of Musk's life. Multiple marriages, more children, and of course, Twitter.
The Twitter takeover, that's a whole other story. All right, so we're back, ready to dig into the final chapter of the Elon Musk saga.
And it's a doozy. We've covered SpaceX, Tesla, but in this last part, Isaacson dives into something else. Musk's personal life.
It's definitely more than just rockets and electric cars.
Way more. One thing that really stood out to me was Musk's need for intensity in everything, not just work, relationships too.
Yeah, Isaacson talks about his marriages. Justine Musk to Lula Riley. A lot of ups and downs.
And his relationship with Amber Heard, Isaacson describes it as particularly stormy.
It seems like a pattern.
These intense connections that burn bright but don't last.
Right. At what point does that constant drama become exhausting?
Good question. And Isaacson also touches on Musk's mental health. Periods of stress, isolation, even hints of depression.
Remember those times when he was basically living at the Tesla factory?
Pushing yourself to the limit.
It's hard to imagine that level of commitment.
And yet he still achieved incredible things.
It raises questions about the cost, though.
Yeah. Isaacson talks about the impact on his relationships, not just romantic ones. Family, colleagues too.
It's like he struggles to maintain close connections.
Even though he's this guy who's changing the world, connecting people through technology.
That's kind of a paradox.
Totally. And then there's Twitter.
Right. Why did he buy Twitter?
Even Isaacson seems a bit baffled by that one. The book spends a lot of time on the Twitter saga, and it is wild.
It all happened so fast.
It did. From tweeting about taking Tesla private to offering to buy Twitter, it felt impulsive.
But Isaacson also says Musk has strong feelings about Twitter, sees it as this platform for free speech.
The potential for an everything app.
But it seems like he underestimated how complex running a social media company would be.
Especially one like Twitter.
It's like he jumped into the deep end.
And wasn't prepared for what he found.
Mass layoffs, policy changes, clashes with advertisers.
And bringing back Donald Trump's account.
So what's the final verdict on Elon Musk, according to Isaacson?
It's hard to say. Isaacson doesn't give us a simple answer. He paints this portrait of a man who is brilliant and flawed, visionary and reckless, inspiring and infuriating.
He's achieved the impossible.
But he's also made mistakes.
Left a lot of chaos behind.
He's a true icon of our time, but also a reminder that even the greatest minds are human.
So what can we take away from all of this?
I think Isaacson's book makes us think about ambition, innovation, what it means to be human.
It's a cautionary tale, but also a story about the power of human ingenuity.
It's a story that's still being written.
And that's Elon Musk, as explored in Walter Isaacson's biography. In Minutes. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive with Bookkast, bestsellers in minutes.